I never thought I'd find myself back in Cypress Hollow, not after all these years. I had left that place behind, along with its murky waters and creeping shadows. But when Amanda went missing, I knew I had no choice. The swamp had called her, just as it had once called me. The drive down to Louisiana was long and filled with memories I had tried to bury. The swamp was more than just a place to me. It was a living, breathing entity, filled with secrets and dangers that most people couldn't even begin to comprehend. I had grown up in its embrace, learned its language, and felt its pulse. But I had also seen the dark side of Cypress Hollow, the part that people whispered about in hushed tones and avoided mentioning at all costs. Amanda had been fascinated by my stories of the swamp, always eager to hear more about the creatures and mysteries that lurked within. I should have known that her curiosity would lead her back there. She was an adventurous spirit, unafraid of the unknown. But Cypress Hollow was different. It was a place where the lines between reality and myth blurred, where legends walked alongside the living. I arrived at the small rundown motel on the outskirts of town, my heart heavy with sorrow. The sheriff, an old friend of my father's, was waiting for me. His face was lined with worry, his eyes filled with the weight of bad news. "Logan," he greeted me, his voice gruff. "I was hoping I wouldn't see you again under these circumstances." "Sheriff," I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell me what happened." "She went out into the swamp 3 days ago," he said, his expression grim. "She said she was looking for something. Wouldn't tell anyone what. Her friends said she had been acting strange, talking about seeing things in the water, hearing voices." I felt a chill run down my spine. The swamp had a very way of getting under your skin, drawing you in with its mysteries. It seemed Amanda had fallen victim to its allure. "I'll find her," I said, more to myself than to the sheriff. "Logan, you know what's out there," he warned. "It's dangerous, especially at night. We've had reports of strange sightings, people disappearing." "I know," I replied, my voice firm, "but I have to try." The sheriff nodded, resigned. "Be careful. The swamp, it's different now." I didn't need him to tell me that. The swamp had always been different, a place where the rules didn't apply. But now it seemed the darkness had deepened, the shadows grown longer. The next morning I set out early, the fog still hanging low over the water. I knew the swamp better than most, but even I felt a sense of unease as I ventured deeper into its depths. The air was thick with humidity, the smell of decaying vegetation and stagnant water filling my nostrils. The sound of insects buzzed around me, and somewhere in the distance a bird caught. I followed the narrow winding paths. I remembered from my childhood, my footsteps muffled by the soft, wet ground. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. It was like entering another world, a place where time stood still and the past lingered like a ghost. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The swamp was alive with unseen eyes, the creatures that called it home observing me from the shadows. I had heard stories of people who ventured too deep into the swamp never to be seen again. Stories of creatures that lurked beneath the water, waiting to drag unsuspecting victims to their doom. I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. I had to find Amanda. I had to bring her back. The thought of her out there alone, scared and lost, spurred on me. I came across signs of her passage, broken branches, footprints in the mud. She had been here not long ago. But my heart pounded in my chest as I followed the trail, each step bringing me closer to her. And then I saw it, a small makeshift camp, abandoned. My breath caught in my throat as I approached. There were signs of a struggle. The ground disturbed, belongings scattered, but there was no sign of Amanda. I called out her name, my voice echoing through the trees. There was no answer, only the silence of the swamp. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Was I too late? As I searched the camp, I found something that sent a chill down my spine. A notebook, half buried in the mud. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was Amanda's. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning her handwriting. But it was the last entry that caught my attention. "Something is out here," she had written. "I've seen it. A shadow in the water. It's watching me." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The swamp was full of legends, stories of creatures that defied explanation. But I had never believed them, not until now. As the sun began to set, I knew I had to make a decision. Staying in the swamp overnight was dangerous, but I couldn't leave without finding Amanda. I decided to set up camp and continue to search in the morning. The night was dark and oppressive, the air heavy with moisture. The sounds of the swamp seemed amplified in the darkness. The rustling leaves and the croaking of frogs echoing around me. I sat by the small fire I had built, the light flickering in the darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the swamp itself was aware of my presence, its unseen eyes following my every move. I tried to stay calm, to focus on the task at hand, but the darkness was getting to me. Then I heard it. A splash in the water, not far from where I sat. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained my ears, trying to hear over the cacophony of the night. There it was again, a soft, almost rhythmic splashing, like something moving through the water. I grabbed my flashlight from my bag and shone it toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the murky water. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then, something moved in the beam of light. A shadow, just beneath the surface. I felt a chill run down my spine. The shadow moved closer, breaking the surface of the water. I saw a pair of eyes glowing faintly in the night, staring back at me. The creature was partially submerged, its features obscured by the water. But I could see enough to know it wasn't human. The eyes were unsettling, almost hypnotic. They held a strange, otherworldly intelligence, as if the creature was studying me, trying to understand what I was. I felt a surge of fear, my instincts screaming at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my eyes away from the creature. The creature made a low, guttural sound, like a cross between a growl and a hiss. It was a sound that sent a shiver down my spine, a primal noise that seemed to resonate in the deepest parts of my mind. The creature moved closer, its body emerging from the water. It was larger than I had expected. Its form humanoid, but twisted, almost grotesque. I took a step back, my mind racing. What was this thing? And more importantly, what did it want with me? The creature continued to approach, its movements slow and deliberate. I could see its skin now, a sickly mottled green, covered in scales. It had long, clawed fingers, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. It looked like something out of a nightmare. My hand tightened around the flashlight, my only weapon. I knew I couldn't fight this thing, but I had to do something. I swung the flashlight at the creature, hoping to scare it off, but the creature merely tilted its head, as if curious, and reached out towards me. Before I could react, the creature spoke. Its voice was low and raspy. like the sound of wind through dead leaves. "You should not be here," it said, its words sending chills down my spine. "This place is not for you." I stared at the creature, my mind struggling to process what had happened. The creature continued to speak, its eyes never leaving me. "You seek the girl," it said, "but she is not here. She is with them." "Them," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The creature nodded, its eyes narrowing. "They have taken her. She is in danger." I felt a surge of panic. Where? Who has her? The creature turned its head as if listening to something only it could hear. Then it looked back at me, its eyes filled with something that almost looked like pity. "You cannot save her," it said, "but you can save yourself. Leave this place and never return." With that, the creature turned and slipped back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. I stood there, staring at the spot where it had been, my mind racing. What had just happened? What was this creature, and what did it mean by them? I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't leave. Not without Amanda. I had to find her, no matter what it took. The encounter with the creature left me shaken, but it also gave me a renewed sense of urgency. Amanda was in danger, and I had to find her. I spent the rest of the night planning my next move, going over the map of the swamp in my head. There were places I hadn't been in years, places that most people didn't even know existed. If she was anywhere, it would be in one of those hidden corners of the swamp. As dawn broke, I picked up my camp and set out, the memory of the creature's words echoing in my mind. They have taken her. She is in danger. But who were they? The swamp was full of legends, stories of creatures and beings that defied explanation. But I had never seen anything like the creature from the night before. And if there were others like it, then Amanda was in serious trouble. I followed the trail of broken branches and footprints, my heart pounding with each step. The swamp was eerily quiet, the usual cacophony of birds and insects absent. It was as if the swamp itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The trees seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. I kept my eyes peeled, my senses on high alert, but I saw no sign of the creature or of Amanda. I reached a clearing, the ground covered in thick black mud. In the center of the clearing was a small, dilapidated cabin, barely standing. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, the roof caved in, and the walls covered in moss. But there was something about the place that felt off, like it didn't belong in the swamp. I approached the cabin cautiously, my hand on the flashlight in my pocket. As I got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were symbols carved into the wood of the cabin, strange, intricate designs that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I didn't recognize the symbols, but they gave off a sense of power, like they were meant to keep something in or out. I reached out and touched one of the symbols, feeling a strange tingling sensation in my fingers. The air around me seemed to shimmer, and for a moment I thought I heard voices, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I had to focus. I pushed open the door to the cabin, the wood creaking under my weight. Inside, the air was thick and with dust and decay. The floor was covered in debris, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with jars and bottles, their contents long since dried up or rotted away. In the center of the room was a table, covered in more of the strange symbols. As I approached it cautiously, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. As I got closer, I saw that there was something on the table, hidden under a dusty cloth. I reached out and pulled the cloth away, revealing a book. The cover was made of dark, cracked leather, and the pages were yellowed with age. I opened it, my fingers trembling. The book was filled with handwritten notes and drawings depicting strange creatures and rituals. It was a journal, written by someone who had lived in the swamp long ago. As I flipped through the pages, I found the entries about creatures of the swamp, descriptions of beings that matched the one I had seen the night before. But there was something else too. The writer spoke of a group, a cult, that had worshipped the creatures, believing them to be gods. The cult had performed rituals to summon the creatures, to bring them forth from the darkness. My heart sank as I read the final entry. The writer warned that the cult was growing stronger, that they were preparing for something big, something that would change the swamp and the world forever. I felt a chill run down my spine. The cult must have taken Amanda, and they were planning something terrible. I had to find her, and I had to stop them. With the journal in hand, I left the cabin and continued my search. The sun was high in the sky now, casting long shadows across the ground. I felt a sense of urgency, knowing that time was running out. The cult could be performing their ritual at any moment. And if I didn't find Amanda, it might be too late. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The swamp felt alive, with unseen eyes. The creatures of the swamp observing me from the shadows. I felt like it was being herded, guided towards something. But what? I came across another trail, this one marked with strange symbols carved into the trees. They were similar to the ones that I had seen in the cabin, but different somehow. They felt older, more powerful. I followed the trail, my heart pounding in my chest. The trail led me to another clearing, this one dominated by a large ancient tree. The tree was massive, its roots twisting and winding through the ground like serpents. There was something about the tree that felt wrong, like it was a blight on the land. The air around it was thick with the smell of decay, and the ground was littered with bones. I approached the tree cautiously, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. As I got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, tied to the tree, was Amanda. She was unconscious, her head hanging limply to the side. Her clothes were torn and her skin was pale. I felt a surge of anger and fear. What had they done to her? I ran to her, my hands shaking as I untied the ropes that bound her. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she looked at me in confusion. Then recognition dawned in her eyes. "Logan?" she whispered, her voice weak. "It's me," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'm here. You're safe now." She tried to sit up, but she was too weak. I held her close, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I had found her. But as I looked around the clearing, I knew we weren't safe yet. "We have to go," I said, helping her to her feet. "The cult. They're coming." She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. I helped her walk, supporting her as we made our way back through the swamp. The trees seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing darker. I felt a sense of dread, like we were being followed. As we walked, Amanda told me what had happened. She had come to the swamp to investigate the stories I had told her, drawn by a strange compulsion. Had seen the creatures, felt their presence, and then the cult had found her. They had taken her, tied her to the tree, and left her there as a sacrifice. I felt a surge of anger. The cult was planning something terrible, and they were using Amanda as part of their ritual. I knew we had to stop them, but I didn't know how. As we reached the edge of the swamp, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, standing in the shadows, was the creature from the night before. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, watching us. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, staring at us. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did it want, and why was it following us? Before I could do anything, the creature turned and disappeared into the darkness. I felt a sense of relief, but also a sense of unease. The creature had been watching us, but it hadn't attacked. Why? We reached the safety of the town, and I took Amanda to the sheriff. He was shocked to see her, but relieved that she was safe. I told him everything that had happened, about the cult and the creatures. He listened, his face growing more serious with each word. "We need to stop them," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever they're planning, we can't let it happen." I nodded, my heart heavy with worry. The cult was growing stronger, and the creatures were real. But we didn't have much time. We had to act fast. We spent the next few hours planning our next move. The sheriff called in reinforcements, and we gathered supplies and weapons. Amanda was still weak, but she insisted on coming with us. She was determined to help, to stop the cult and the creatures. As we prepared, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The swamp had always been a place of mystery and danger, but now it felt like something more. It felt like it was alive, like it was watching us, waiting for something. The sheriff pulled me aside, his face grim. "Logan, I've seen a lot of things in my time, but nothing like this. Are you sure we can stop them?" I hesitated, then nodded. "We have to try. The cult is planning something big, and we can't let it happen." He nodded, his expression determined. "All right, let's do this." We set out at dawn, a group of 10 men armed with guns and machetes. Amanda and I led the way, our eyes scanning the swamp for any sign of the cult or the creatures. The air was thick with tension, the silence oppressive. As we walked, I felt a sense of unease growing. The swamp was different now, darker and more dangerous. The creatures were out there watching, waiting. I could feel their presence, like a weight pressing down on me. We reached the clearing with the ancient tree, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The tree was massive, its roots twisting and winding through the ground like serpents. The air around it was thick with the smell of decay, and the ground was littered with bones. The sheriff signaled us to spread out, and we fanned out around the clearing. I kept my eyes on the tree, my heart pounding in my chest. The cult had to be here somewhere. Then I saw them, a group of figures dressed in dark robes, emerging from the shadows. They were chanting, their voices low and rhythmic. In the center of the group was a man, tall and imposing, with a hood covering his face. He carried a staff, and I could see strange symbols carved into the wood. The sheriff raised his gun, his voice firm. "Stop right there, you're under arrest." The man in the center of the group turned to face us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. His eyes were dark, almost black, and there was something unsettling about the way he looked at us. He raised his staff, and the chanting grew louder. The sheriff fired his gun, the sound echoing through the clearing. The bullet struck the man in the chest, but he didn't fall. Instead, he raised his staff higher, and the ground beneath us began to shake. I felt a surge of fear. The man was chanting something, a language I couldn't understand. The air around us seemed to crackle with energy, and the ground began to split open. I could see something rising from the ground, something dark and twisted. The sheriff fired again, but it was too late. The ground erupted and a creature emerged, its body covered in scales, and its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It let out a roar, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. The cult members began to chant louder, their voices rising in a crescendo. The creature lunged at us, its claws outstretched. The sheriff fired again, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The creature swiped at him, sending him flying across the clearing. I raised my flashlight, shining it at the creature. It hesitated, its eyes narrowing. I didn't know why, but the light seemed to affect it. I swung the flashlight at it, and the creature recoiled, hissing. Amanda grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Logan, we have to get out of here." I nodded, but my heart was pounding in my chest. The creature was distracted by the light, but I knew it wouldn't last long. We had to find a way to stop it, and fast. I looked around, my eyes scanning the clearing. The cult members were still chanting, their voices growing louder. I knew they were likely the key, that if we could stop them, we could stop the creature. I raised the flashlight again, shining it at the cult members. They hesitated, their chanting faltering. I swung the light back and forth, trying to break their concentration. The creature roared, its eyes glowing with anger. It lunged at us, but I swung the flashlight at it, and it hesitated again. I knew we had to act fast. The sheriff struggled to his feet, his face pale. "Logan, the tree, the symbols, they're controlling the creature." I looked at the tree, the strange symbols carved into its bark. I knew he was right. The cult was using the symbols to control the creature, to summon it from the darkness. I raised the flashlight, shining it at the tree. The symbols glowed faintly in the light. I could see the energy flowing from them to the creature. I knew what I had to do. I ran towards the tree, the creature lunging at me. I swung the flashlight at it, and it hesitated, giving me just enough time to reach the tree. I raised the flashlight, smashing it into the symbols. The symbols shattered, the energy dissipating. The creature let out a roar, its body convulsing. The cult members screamed, their chanting faltered. I smashed the flashlight into the tree, again breaking more symbols. The creature roared again, its body beginning to dissolve. The cult members ran, their voices filled with fear. The creature let out one final roar, then dissolved into a cloud of smoke. I fell to my knees, my heart pounding in my chest. The sheriff ran over, his face pale. "Logan, you did it. You stopped them." I looked around, the clearing silent. The cult was gone, the creature defeated. But I knew it wasn't over. The swamp was still dangerous, still full of mysteries and dangers. But for now, we were safe. We returned to the town, exhausted but relieved. The sheriff called in reinforcements, and they searched the swamp for any remaining cult members. They found a few hiding in the shadows, but most had fled. Amanda was safe, but she was shaken. She had seen things, experienced things that she couldn't explain. But she was strong, and I knew she would recover. As for me, I knew I could never forget what had happened. The swamp had always been a part of me, but now it felt like something more. I had seen its darkness, its mysteries, and I knew that no matter what, I could never truly leave it behind. The sheriff thanked me, his expression serious. "Logan, you saved us all. If it wasn't for you, who knows what would have happened?" I nodded, my heart heavy. I knew I had done what I had to. But the swamp was still a dangerous place. There were creatures out there, mysteries waiting to be uncovered. As I stood on the edge of the swamp, looking out at the murky waters, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced my fears, confronted the darkness, and I had survived. But I knew that the swamp would always be a part of me, a place of mystery and danger, and I would always be drawn to it, no matter how hard I tried to resist. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the ground, I turned and walked away, but I knew that I would be back. The swamp was a part of me, and I was a part of it, and no matter where I went, it would always be waiting, calling me back to its depths.
Like and subscribe for more stories like this.